The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council headquarters pierced the artificial atmosphere of Station Prime, like monuments to an age beyond human understanding. Ambassador David Torres stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic shuttle, watching as the massive structure grew larger through the viewport. The station itself dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed, a hollow sphere the size of Earth's moon, housing the governing body that controlled 300,000 star systems across the galaxy. "First time seeing the council chambers?" asked Captain Rodriguez from the pilot's seat, her voice carrying a mix of awe and apprehension. "First time anyone from Earth has seen them," Torres replied, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform. The dark blue fabric bore the simple emblem of United Earth, a silver globe surrounded by 7 stars representing humanity's first colonies. It looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate regalia he had seen in the briefing materials about other species representatives. The shuttle passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one scanning their vessel with technologies that made their sensors ping warnings about unknown energy signatures. Through the comm system, voices spoke in languages that their translation algorithms could only partially decode. Clicking sounds that might have been administrative Kretak, harmonic tones that suggested the musical Veltar, and subsonic rumbles that could only come from the massive Threnody. "Council control to Earth vessel," came a mechanical voice through their communication array. "You are cleared for diplomatic docking bay 77 Alpha. Ambassador Torres, you have 30 minutes to reach the Grand Assembly before proceedings begin." Torres felt his stomach tighten. 30 minutes to walk into a chamber where the fate of humanity would be decided by beings who had been manipulating galactic politics since before humans discovered fire. The formal charges against Earth were serious: unauthorized expansion into protected space, interference with established trade routes, and the mysterious disappearance of 3 consortium survey fleets in sectors where human colonies had recently been established. The docking bay was unlike anything in human space. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to their presence, while maintenance crews of at least 6 different species worked on vessels with hull designs that defied conventional physics. A Veltar administrator, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns, gestured for Torres to follow a glowing pathway toward the inner chambers. The corridor stretched for what felt like miles, passing viewing windows that showed glimpses of the station's impossible interior. Entire ecosystems thrived in vast chambers, floating gardens tended by gaseous beings, underwater cities inhabited by aquatic species, and geometric structures that housed civilizations based on pure energy. This was power on a scale that made human achievement seem insignificant. "Ambassador Torres of Earth," announced a voice that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "You are entering the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council. Please observe proper diplomatic protocols and remain in the designated area unless called upon to speak." The doors ahead opened with a sound like distant thunder, revealing a sight that made Torres pause despite his diplomatic training. The Grand Assembly was a sphere within the sphere, its walls rising in tiers that stretched up beyond the range of human vision. Thousands of beings occupied seats arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each species grouped in sections that accommodated their specific environmental needs. Near the bottom, massive Threnody representatives sat in gravity-enhanced chambers, their stone-like forms requiring reinforced platforms. Above them, the gossamer ethereals floated in columns of controlled atmosphere, their translucent bodies shimmering with internal light. Aquatic species occupied transparent tubes filled with their native fluids, while energy-based beings manifested as coherent light, patterns in specialized containment fields. The center of it all stood the Council of Speakers, 12 beings, representing the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Their platform hovered in the middle of the sphere, slowly rotating to address different sections of the assembly. Each speaker bore the weight of millions of worlds and trillions of lives under their governance. "The human representative will approach the center," commanded Speaker Velthara of the ancient progenitor race, its voice carrying harmonics that made Torres feel like he was being examined by something far beyond his understanding. Torres walked across the transparent bridge that extended from his entry point to the speaking platform in the center. Below him, the sphere continued downward for hundreds of meters, filled with more representatives than he could count. Above, the tiers rose until they disappeared into atmospheric haze. He was one small human surrounded by the combined might of galactic civilization. Earth stands accused of 17 violations of galactic law, announced Speaker Korath, a being whose metallic form shifted and flowed like liquid mercury. Your species has expanded beyond authorized boundaries, interfered with established civilizations, and demonstrated concerning military capabilities against Council survey missions. The charges hung in the air like a physical weight. Torres could feel thousands of alien eyes focused on him. Compound eyes, sensor clusters, electromagnetic perception organs, and forms of sight he couldn't even comprehend. They were waiting for his response, expecting him to plead for mercy or attempt to justify humanity's actions. Honored speakers, Torres began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. I appreciate the opportunity to address these concerns. However, I believe there may be some misunderstandings about humanity's activities and intentions. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled representatives. Speaker Drakfin of the hegemony, whose crystalline form pulsed with internal fire, leaned forward with obvious interest. Misunderstandings? The speaker inquired. Your species has established colonies in 14 systems claimed by other civilizations. Your vessels have been detected in restricted sectors. 3 of our survey fleets have vanished in areas of space where your expansion has been most aggressive. What misunderstanding could possibly explain such clear violations? Torres reached into his diplomatic case and withdrew a small data device, standard human technology that looked almost quaint compared to the advanced systems surrounding him. If I may present evidence that might clarify the situation. The data device projected a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of local space. What it revealed made several of the speakers lean back in what Torres hoped was surprise rather than anger. The map showed not just human colonies, but a complex network of sensor arrays, communication relays, and observation posts that had been monitoring galactic activity for far longer than anyone had suspected. You see, Torres continued, his diplomatic training keeping his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was revealing. Humanity has been aware of the Galactic Council's interest in our expansion for quite some time. We've been monitoring the survey fleets, the restricted sectors, and the discussions about what to do about the human problem that have been occurring in certain private council sessions. The silence that followed was unlike anything Torres had ever experienced. It was the silence of thousands of advanced beings, realizing that they had fundamentally misunderstood the species they were dealing with. The Grand Assembly had expected to judge a primitive civilization. Instead, they were discovering that humanity had been watching them in return. The question, Torres said, allowing a slight smile to cross his face, is whether the Council is interested in learning what else we've discovered about galactic politics during our observation period. The holographic display expanded, filling the space above the speaking platform with a detailed star chart that made several council speakers shift uncomfortably in their positions. The map showed human observation posts in sectors that were supposed to be secret, monitoring stations near restricted systems, and communication intercepts from private council channels that should have been impossible for any unauthorized species to access. This is fabricated, declared Speaker Zalmesh of the consortium, its segmented carapace clicking with agitation. No primitive species could have achieved such comprehensive surveillance without our detection systems identifying the intrusions. Torres allowed his smile to widen slightly. Speaker Zalmesh, I believe you're referring to the detection grid installed around your primary research facility in the Kepler trinary system, the one that was upgraded 6 months ago with new quantum sensors? He touched his data device and the display zoomed in on a specific location. You might be interested to know that the upgrade was performed by Stellar Dynamics Corporation, a company owned and operated entirely by human personnel using advanced identity modification techniques. The speaker's carapace went completely still, a sign of extreme shock among its species. Around the chamber, translator systems worked overtime as representatives began rapid conversations in their native languages. The implications were staggering. If humans had been operating within the consortium's most secure facilities, what other infiltrations had gone undetected? Impossible, rumbled Speaker Gorath of the Stone Throne Empire, its massive form causing small tremors in the platform as it leaned forward. Our genetic scanners are calibrated to detect any non-native biological signatures. No alien could pass our security protocols. Respectfully, Speaker Gorath, Torres replied, accessing another section of his display. Your security protocols are indeed very thorough. They successfully detected and rejected 47 attempted infiltrations by other galactic species over the past decade. However, they were designed based on known biological patterns from established civilizations. The display showed a detailed breakdown of genetic modification techniques that made several representatives gasp in recognition. Humanity's approach to biology is somewhat more flexible than most species. The holographic display shifted to show comparative biological data. Where other species had evolved along predictable paths, human genetic patterns showed signs of deliberate modification on a scale that suggested technology far beyond what the Council had attributed to Earth's civilization. Synthetic chromosomes, engineered cellular structures, and biological systems that could mimic the basic patterns of other species while maintaining human consciousness and intelligence. Your operatives, Torres continued, have been living and working within your societies for years. Not as infiltrators in the traditional sense, but as genuine contributors to your civilizations who happen to be human in origin. Dr. Elena Vasquez has been instrumental in advancing consortium stellar cartography for the past 3 years. Engineer Marcus Chen helped design the security upgrades for hegemony border stations. Researcher Anna Volkov has been studying ethereal energy manipulation techniques while serving in your scientific exchange program. Each name he mentioned caused visible reactions among the relevant delegations. The consortium's representatives began urgent internal communications, while the hegemony's crystalline forms flickered with patterns that indicated serious concern. The ethereal's light patterns shifted to frequencies that human equipment couldn't quite interpret, but their agitation was unmistakable. But the most interesting discovery, Torres said, pausing to let the chamber's atmosphere grow even more tense, came from our analysis of council voting patterns over the past 2 decades. The display changed again, showing a complex network diagram that mapped relationships between different council factions, voting blocks, and the flow of influence between various civilizations. What it revealed was a picture of galactic politics that was far more complex and manipulative than most representatives realized. The charges against humanity weren't developed in response to our recent expansion, Torres explained, his voice carrying clearly through the increasingly silent chamber. They were formulated 18 months ago, during a private meeting between the Primary Trade Council and the Military Coordination Committee. The goal was to create a legal framework for limiting human expansion before we became too established to contain. Easily, Speaker Velthera's ancient form shimmered with what might have been embarrassment or anger. These meetings are confidential council business. Even if such discussions occurred, no unauthorized species could have access to internal deliberations. Trade Coordinator Vexali of the Outer Rim Commercial Alliance, Torres replied calmly. She's been a valued member of your Primary Trade Council for 8 years. Excellent work on the mineral rights legislation, by the way. It really did help smaller civilizations gain better access to rare elements. He paused to let that sink in. She's also Lieutenant Colonel Alexandra Petrov of the Earth Intelligence Service. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. The Outer Rim Alliance's delegation erupted in urgent conversations, while other factions began questioning the authenticity of their own members. If humans had penetrated the Council's highest levels, how much of galactic politics had been influenced by Earth's agenda? This is a clear violation of Council law, declared Speaker Korath, its metallic form flowing into more aggressive configurations. Infiltration of government bodies is an act of war under galactic statutes. Actually, Torres said, consulting his data device with the casual manner of someone checking routine information, according to Council Statute 4847, subsection 12, intelligence gathering through legal employment and voluntary service is explicitly permitted for all Council member species. Since humanity applied for provisional membership status 14 years ago, an application that has been deliberately stalled in committee, we technically have the same intelligence rights as any other council species. The legal implications hit the assembly like a physical blow. If humanity's infiltration was technically legal under council law, then the charges against Earth became far more complex. More importantly, It meant that everything human operatives had discovered during their years of service was also legally obtained intelligence. The survey fleets, Torres continued, were not destroyed by human military action. They were investigating systems where human colonies had reported unusual energy signatures. When they attempted to establish forward bases in direct violation of first contact protocols, they encountered automated defense systems that had been put in place to protect developing civilizations. The mysterious disappearances were actually successful evacuations after their equipment was disabled. The display showed tactical recordings from the incidents, clearly demonstrating that human forces had gone to considerable effort to ensure no casualties while defending their territorial claims. The missing crews had been returned safely to Council space with their memories of human capabilities carefully edited to protect operational security. 17 violations of galactic law, Torres said, his tone shifting to something more serious. But we've identified over 40 violations of those same laws by Council members attempting to limit human expansion through illegal surveillance, territorial manipulation, and coordinated economic pressure. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the situation became clear. Humanity hadn't simply been expanding into galactic space. They had been systematically documenting every attempt to contain or eliminate them while building a comprehensive intelligence network that had compromised the Council's most secure operations. The question now, Torres concluded, is whether the Council is prepared to discuss a more equitable arrangement for humanity's place in galactic civilization, or whether we need to present the remainder of our findings to the broader galactic community. The threat was politely delivered, but unmistakable. Humanity had been watching, learning, and preparing for exactly this moment. The emergency recess that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes. Enough time for the major Council factions to conduct urgent consultations with their governments and security services. When the assembly reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted from confidence to genuine concern. Torres remained at the center platform, his diplomatic composure unchanged despite the magnitude of the revelations he had just delivered. The Council has reviewed your claims, announced Speaker Velthara, the ancient being's form flickering with patterns that suggested deep thought. However, surveillance capabilities and legal technicalities do not address the fundamental issue of human expansion into protected space. Your colonies have been established in systems designated for future Council development. Torres nodded respectfully. I understand the concern, Speaker Velthara. However, I think there may be another misunderstanding about the nature of human expansion. He activated his data device again, and the holographic display showed a new star chart focused on human-controlled space. Tell me, when Council surveys identified these systems for future development, what criteria were used? The display highlighted a dozen star systems, each one showing detailed planetary analysis data. Speaker Korath's metallic form shifted as it accessed Council records. Standard habitability assessments. Planetary composition suitable for Class M terraforming protocols. No existing indigenous life above Level 3 complexity. Strategic value for trade route establishment. Excellent analysis, Torres agreed. Now I'd like to show you the same systems from humanity's perspective. The display shifted, revealing a completely different picture. Where Council surveys had shown empty worlds suitable for terraforming, human analysis revealed complex ecosystems that had been missed by conventional scanning methods. Kepler 442b, designated by the Council as a prime terraforming candidate, Torres explained, highlighting one specific world. Your surveys detected no significant life signs because they used standard electromagnetic and biochemical scanning protocols. Human surveys detected 17 distinct forms of silicon-based microorganisms that form the foundation of a complex underground ecosystem. Terraforming would have constituted ecological genocide on a planetary scale. The revelation sent shocked whispers through the assembly. The Council prided itself on protecting developing civilizations. Yet their own expansion protocols had been systematically missing entire categories of life due to the limitations of their scanning technologies. How is this possible? Demanded Speaker Zalmesh. Council survey methods have been refined over thousands of years. They represent the combined scientific knowledge of dozens of advanced civilizations. That's precisely the problem, Torres replied, his tone taking on an educational quality. Council science is based on consensus. the averaging of knowledge from many different species to create standardized protocols. Human science is based on deviation, deliberately seeking out anomalies and exceptions that other approaches might miss. The display showed comparative analysis data that made several scientific delegations lean forward with intense interest. Human research methodologies were wildly unconventional by galactic standards, combining approaches that seemed contradictory but produced results that no single species had achieved independently. More concerning, Torres continued, is what we discovered about the protected systems themselves. The star chart zoomed out to show a broader view of galactic space, with different colored markers indicating various levels of council protection and development status. 47 systems currently designated as protected contain technological artifacts that predate all known galactic civilizations. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the constant background hum of the station's system seemed to fade as the implications sank in. Archaeological sites of sufficient importance could rewrite galactic history, and the Council had been planning to destroy them through terraforming operations. These discoveries, Torres explained, required immediate protection while proper research could be conducted. Human colonies weren't established to claim territory. They were established to preserve these sites until the galactic archaeological community could properly study them. Speaker Drakvan's crystalline form pulsed with rapid color changes that indicated extreme agitation. Such discoveries must be reported to the Council immediately. No single species has the authority to make preservation decisions unilaterally. Under normal circumstances, I would agree, Torres replied. However, our analysis of Council voting records suggested that archaeological preservation requests have a historically poor success rate when they conflict with economic development interests, particularly when the requesting species isn't a full Council member. The diplomatic accusation was carefully phrased, but its meaning was clear. Humanity had discovered evidence that the Council's preservation protocols were influenced more by political and economic considerations than scientific importance. Rather than risk losing irreplaceable archaeological sites to bureaucratic processes, they had taken direct action to protect them. The survey fleets, Torres continued, were attempting to establish development infrastructure in 3 of these protected archaeological zones. Our defensive response was calibrated to disable their equipment while preserving all personnel. No lives were lost, and the crews were returned safely to Council space with modified memories to protect the security of the preservation sites. The display showed detailed recordings of the encounters, demonstrating human military capabilities that shocked the assembled representatives. The technology being used was clearly far in advance of what the Council had attributed to humanity. But more importantly, it had been used with surgical precision to achieve specific objectives without causing casualties. Your military capabilities, observed Speaker Gorath, appear to exceed our intelligence estimates by several orders of magnitude. How has your species achieved such rapid technological advancement? Torres smiled, and for the first time since entering the chamber he seemed genuinely pleased with the question. That brings us to the most important aspect of this situation. Humanity's technological development hasn't been happening in isolation. The display changed to show a complex network diagram, mapping scientific collaboration between human researchers and members of various galactic civilizations. The connections were extensive, showing joint research projects, technology exchanges, and collaborative developments that had been occurring under the Council's collective awareness threshold. Dr. Elena Vasquez's work with Consortium Stellar Cartography, Torres explained, led to breakthrough developments in gravitational wave detection that improved both human and consortium navigation systems. Engineer Marcus Chen's security system designs incorporated hegemony crystalline computing principles that enhanced both species' defensive capabilities. Researcher Anna Volkov's studies with the ethereals produced advances in energy manipulation that benefit all 3 civilizations. The network diagram revealed the true scope of human integration into galactic scientific communities. Rather than developing in isolation, humanity had been quietly building collaborative relationships with individual researchers and institutions across dozens of different species, creating an informal but highly effective technology exchange network. The rapid advancement of human capabilities, Torres concluded, has been the result of decades of careful scientific diplomacy, combined with our species' particular talent for synthesizing disparate approaches into innovative solutions. We haven't been threatening galactic stability, we've been contributing to galactic advancement while protecting irreplaceable archaeological treasures. The chamber remained silent as representatives absorbed the magnitude of what they had just learned. Humanity hadn't been an aggressive expansion threat requiring containment. They had been an unrecognized partner in galactic development, whose contributions had been systematically overlooked due to bureaucratic blind spots and political considerations. "The question," Torres said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "is whether the Council is prepared to acknowledge these contributions and work toward a more collaborative relationship, or whether we need to continue operating through unofficial channels to protect galactic heritage and advance scientific knowledge." The choice was now the Council's to make. The second emergency recess lasted 43 minutes, during which urgent communications flowed between the Council chamber and governments across the galaxy. When the Assembly reconvened, the composition of the speaking platform had changed. Additional speakers had joined the original 12, representing military commands, intelligence services, and archaeological councils that had previously been content to observe from the periphery. "Ambassador Torres," began Speaker Velthara, its ancient voice carrying new undertones of respect mixed with wariness, "the Council has conducted preliminary verification of your claims regarding archaeological preservation. Our initial findings suggest that your species' actions may indeed have prevented significant cultural losses." Torres inclined his head politely. "Thank you for your consideration, Speaker Velthara. However, I suspect that archaeological preservation is not the primary concern of the additional Council representatives who have joined us." Military Coordinator Tekval, a being whose armored carapace bore the scars of conflicts across multiple star systems, leaned forward with obvious intensity. "The defensive capabilities demonstrated by human forces exceed our threat assessment models. We require clarification regarding the scope of human military development." "A reasonable request," Torres replied, consulting his data device. "However, I think the more relevant question is why our military capabilities weren't detected by Council intelligence services during their surveillance of human space." The holographic display activated again, this time showing a three-dimensional map of human territory that made several military representatives shift uncomfortably. The map revealed not the scattered colonies the Council intelligence had documented, but a sophisticated network of interconnected systems with defensive capabilities that had been completely invisible to conventional scanning methods. "Council, surveillance has been monitoring human expansion for approximately 8 years, Torres explained, highlighting specific observation posts and intelligence gathering stations. "During that time, your services documented 12 colonial settlements, 17 mining operations, and 6 research stations, all of which were exactly what they appeared to be." The display zoomed in on one of the documented human colonies, showing a typical settlement with agricultural areas, residential zones, and basic industrial facilities. Then the image shifted, revealing the same location through different scanning methods that exposed underground facilities, hidden manufacturing complexes, and defensive installations that had been constructed using materials and techniques that rendered them undetectable to standard Council sensors. "What you were seeing," Torres continued, "was the civilian infrastructure we wanted you to see. The actual scope of human development in these systems is considerably more extensive." Military Coordinator Tekval's carapace plates shifted in what amounted to a defensive posture among its species. "You constructed military installations specifically to avoid detection by Council surveillance?" "We constructed research and development facilities," Torres corrected politely. "The fact that they weren't detected by your surveillance says more about the limitations of Council intelligence gathering than it does about human deception. We simply applied the same principles that make our archaeological detection methods more effective than standard protocols." The display showed comparative analysis of Council and human detection technologies. Where Council methods relied on standardized approaches optimized for known signatures, human methods used adaptive scanning techniques that looked for anomalies and patterns that might indicate hidden activity. The concern, interjected Intelligence Director Varkos, a being whose mental emanations could be felt even by non-telepathic species, is that human technological development appears to be proceeding at rates that violate known physical constraints. Such advancement typically requires resources on a stellar scale. Torres smiled, and the expression carried implications that made several representatives exchange worried glances. Director Varkos, that brings us to perhaps the most important revelation of this entire discussion. The holographic display expanded dramatically, showing not just human colonial space but a much broader region of the galaxy. What it revealed sent shockwaves through the assembly. Human activity signatures extended far beyond the documented colonies, reaching into sectors that the Council had assumed were empty, space or under the control of other civilizations. Humanity has been active in galactic space for considerably longer than Council records indicate, Torres explained. The colonies you've been monitoring represent less than 15% of actual human settlement and development. The silence that followed was profound. If humanity had been concealing the majority of their expansion, the strategic implications were staggering. They weren't a minor species seeking accommodation. Within galactic civilization, they were a major power that had been operating below the Council's awareness threshold. The mining operations in the outer spiral, Torres continued, highlighting a region of space that Council maps showed as unexplored territory, have been extracting rare elements for human industrial development for 12 years. The research stations in the void sectors have been conducting advanced physics experiments that would be impossible near inhabited systems. The manufacturing complexes in the dark zone have been producing the technologies that made our archaeological discoveries possible. Each revelation redrew the galactic political map in real time. Regions that the Council had considered strategic assets or future development areas were revealed to be already under human influence. More alarming, many of these installations were positioned at critical points that could influence trade routes, communication networks, and military movements across vast areas of space. Why reveal this now? Asked Speaker Korath, its metallic form flowing into configurations that suggested both fascination and concern. Your species could have continued operating without Council awareness for decades. Because, Torres replied, his diplomatic composure giving way to something more serious. Our intelligence networks have identified a growing consensus among certain Council factions that the human problem requires a more decisive solution than legal proceedings. The holographic display shifted to show communication intercepts and strategic planning documents that made several military representatives tense visibly. The documents outlined contingency plans for military action against human space, resource denial strategies, and coordination protocols for a multi-species response to human expansion. These plans, Torres explained, suggest that regardless of the outcome of these proceedings, certain factions intended to pursue military solutions to limit human influence in galactic affairs. This put us in the unfortunate position of having to choose between continued concealment and defensive preparation. The display showed real-time tactical information that demonstrated exactly what defensive preparation meant in human terms. Fleet positions, fortified systems, and alliance agreements with non-Council species created a picture of military readiness that made the assembled representatives realize they had completely misjudged the strategic situation. The fleets currently positioned throughout human space, Torres continued, represent approximately 30% of our total military capability. The remainder is distributed through alliance agreements with 17 non-Council civilizations who share our concerns about certain aspects of galactic governance. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't just been building military capabilities in secret, they had been building alliances with civilizations that the Council had either ignored or marginalized. The strategic balance of power in the galaxy had shifted without the Council's awareness. "What do you want?" asked Speaker Velthara, its ancient voice carrying the weight of someone who had finally understood the true scope of the situation. Torres straightened, and for the first time since entering the chamber, he spoke with the full authority of someone representing a major galactic power, recognition of humanity's legitimate place in galactic civilization, acknowledgement of our territorial claims and archaeological preservation efforts, and most importantly, a commitment from the Council that political Differences will be resolved through diplomacy rather than military action. The choice facing the Council was no longer whether to accommodate a minor species seeking membership. It was whether to negotiate with an established power that had been operating beyond their control, or face the consequences of underestimating humanity's true capabilities. The final recess lasted 2 hours and 17 minutes, during which the council chamber became a hub of frantic diplomatic activity. Emergency sessions convened in side chambers as faction leaders tried to process the complete restructuring of galactic politics that Torres had just presented. When the assembly reconvened for the final time, the atmosphere was charged with tension that could be felt even through the environmental controls. The speaking platform now held the full council of speakers plus emergency representatives from every major military command, intelligence service, and economic alliance in known space. This was no longer a routine hearing about colonial violations. It had become the most significant diplomatic crisis in galactic history. Ambassador Torres, Speaker Velthara began, its ancient voice carrying formal protocol despite the extraordinary circumstances. The Council has completed its preliminary assessment of the situation you have presented. Before we proceed to resolution, we require clarification on one final matter. Torres remained perfectly composed despite the weight of thousands of alien gazes focused on him. Of course, Speaker Velthara, how may I assist the Council's understanding? The technological capabilities, intelligence networks, and military preparations you have described required coordinated effort across multiple generations and vast resources, continued the speaker. The scope suggests planning that began before humanity achieved interstellar flight. How is this possible? Torres smiled, and this time the expression carried implications that made even the most confident council members feel uncertain. Speaker Velthara, that may be the most important question asked during these proceedings. The answer requires understanding something fundamental about human nature that most galactic civilizations have difficulty comprehending. The holographic display activated one final time, showing a timeline that stretched back not years or decades, but centuries. The data revealed human activities that predated their supposed first contact with galactic civilization by generations. Humanity began preparing for galactic integration in 1897, Torres announced, the date sending shocked whispers through the assembly. The year that our astronomers confirmed the existence of artificially generated radio signals from multiple star systems. We knew you were out there long before you knew we existed. The timeline showed a progression of human development that had been specifically oriented toward eventual contact with galactic civilization. Educational systems redesigned to produce individuals capable of thinking on interstellar scales. Scientific research focused on technologies that would be necessary for galactic integration. Cultural preparations designed to help humanity maintain its identity while adapting to cosmic diversity. Every human child for the past 6 generations has been educated with the understanding that they were preparing for galactic citizenship, Torres explained. Our expansion into space wasn't driven by population, pressure, or resource needs. It was a deliberate preparation for the challenges we knew we would eventually face. The revelation reframed everything the Council thought they understood about human civilization. This wasn't a species that had stumbled into galactic politics through rapid development. This was a civilization that had been systematically preparing for galactic integration for over a century before achieving interstellar flight. The archaeological preservation efforts, the intelligence networks, the technological developments, Torres continued, were all part of a comprehensive strategy designed to ensure that humanity could contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization while protecting our core interests and values. Military coordinator. Tekval's armored plates shifted in patterns that indicated deep consideration. Such long-term planning suggests strategic thinking on scales that exceed most civilizations' capabilities. What assurance can you provide that human goals align with galactic stability? An excellent question, Torres replied, activating a new section of his display. Coordinator Tekval, I'd like to present our analysis of galactic civilization's current trajectory. The holographic display showed a complex model of galactic politics, economics, and social development that revealed patterns most council members had never considered. Resource depletion in core systems, cultural stagnation among established civilizations, and technological plateaus that suggested galactic advancement had slowed significantly over the past millennium. Galactic civilization is experiencing systemic decline, Torres announced, the words hitting the assembly like a physical blow. Expansion has slowed, innovation has decreased, and political structures have become increasingly rigid. Without significant changes, current trends suggest civilizational stagnation within 3 centuries. The data was undeniable, drawn from the Council's own records and presented with analytical precision that demonstrated deep understanding of galactic affairs. Several economic representatives began urgent consultations as they recognized the accuracy of the projections. Humanity's contributions to galactic science, our archaeological preservation efforts, and our alliance building with marginalized civilizations, Torres continued, represent attempts to address these systemic issues. We're not seeking to dominate galactic civilization. We're trying to revitalize it. The display showed human influence networks throughout the galaxy, revealing a pattern of activity focused on promoting innovation, preserving cultural heritage, and fostering cooperation between different species. Rather than the aggressive expansion the Council had feared, humanity had been working to strengthen galactic civilization from within. The choice facing the Council, Torres said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had fundamentally altered the terms of galactic politics, is whether to embrace the changes necessary for continued civilizational advancement, or attempt to maintain systems that are demonstrably failing. Speaker Drakvan's crystalline form pulsed with rapid color changes. You're suggesting that the Council modify fundamental structures that have maintained galactic peace for millennia. I'm suggesting that the Council acknowledge reality, Torres replied firmly. The structures that maintain peace for millennia are no longer adequate for the challenges facing galactic civilization. Adaptation is not optional. It's survival. The silence that followed was broken by Intelligence Director Varkos, whose mental emanations carried unprecedented uncertainty. What happens if the Council chooses to maintain existing structures? Torres consulted his data device one final time, and the holographic display showed real-time strategic information that made every military representative in the chamber realize the true scope of humanity's preparations. Fleet positions, alliance agreements, and resource control networks revealed that humanity and their non-Council allies controlled enough strategic assets to significantly influence galactic politics regardless of Council decisions. Director Varkos, Torres said quietly, humanity spent over a century preparing for galactic integration. We're committed to contributing to galactic civilization. The question is whether that contribution occurs within Council structures or outside them. The threat was diplomatically phrased but unmistakable. Humanity had achieved sufficient power and influence to operate independently of the Council if necessary. They preferred cooperation, but they were prepared for conflict. What are your terms? Asked Speaker Velthera, the ancient being's voice carrying the resignation of someone who had recognized an inevitable conclusion. Full Council membership for humanity with territorial recognition of our current holdings, Torres replied promptly. Formal acknowledgement of our archaeological preservation authority in designated systems. Establishment of joint committees for addressing galactic development challenges, and modification of Council voting procedures to include input from non-member civilizations. The terms were extensive but reasonable, representing partnership rather than domination. More importantly, they offered the Council a path forward that maintained their authority while acknowledging the new realities of galactic politics. The Council will consider these terms, Speaker Velthara announced formally. These proceedings are recessed pending deliberation. As Torres left the chamber, he knew that humanity had achieved something unprecedented in galactic history. They had forced the Council to negotiate as equals not through conquest or destruction, but through patient preparation and strategic positioning that demonstrated their indispensable value to galactic civilization. The galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.